All right, it is 7:05 on Wednesday, June 4th, and I will call the meeting of the Essex Planning Board to order. We will be reopening the public hearing for the open space residential development proposed for the end of Essex Park Road at 7:15, and until then, we're going to take care of board business. Yeah, whatever we have on the board business.
All right, I've got some board business. So for correspondence, all the resident emails that have come in are in the meeting materials folder online and also in the OSRD folder so that the other boards, departments, and committees may access that. We don't have minutes to approve for tonight. There just wasn't time to finish them effectively, but the recording for the last meeting, generously provided by 1623 Studios, is available online already, so that will suffice for the moment.
And that's accessible on the planning board web page, right?
On the OSRD, Essex Park Road OSRD information page of the planning board page of the town website. I do have the annual sign off for the Registry of Deeds since the election is complete. So if you could just sign next to your name and then pass it down, I can turn that in. Also, I do have copies here. If you can complete this before you go, I'm sure everyone has had time to review the Town of Essex policies as sent in the email, linked in the email, so you can fill out your own form and leave it with me and I'll submit them for us all. And finally, we do have one attestation under the Mullen Rule for Matt to fill out, but now it's officially in the public record as well, about having missed the previous session of this public hearing. As long as you fill this out, that you have reviewed the recording, you will be set to go, and we'll do another one for Shelley next time. And if anyone else misses a session of the public hearing, then that will be the way to be able to still vote on the matter as long as you've only missed one session of the public hearing. Additional updates would be last time, a meeting or two ago, Bill had asked me, and it occurs to me that I should mention to you, you may start to notice that in some of the online materials and occasionally in photocopies, I've redacted cell phone numbers and personal emails. And Bill had asked about that and whether that was allowable. These are not the official records that come in. We don't redact the original copies of applications and that sort of thing. But I did take a training with KP Law last week about open meeting law and public records, and they did reiterate, giving me some reassurance that data privacy and information privacy is an ongoing concern for people, and so this is a good practice to have in place. So anything you see blocked out like that, we still have all of that information, but I'm not going to put anything online with personal contact information. It's just out of respect for those people. And finally, we do have a few items in the review folder, which doesn't really work quite as well in this format. So just so you're aware, there's a new workshop being added by CPTC, a couple KP Law updates that are also in the meeting materials folder you can find if you like there, and I think one Town of Ipswich public hearing notification. So if you want copies or anything of those, let me know. And that's all of my update.
All right, thank you, Teresa. Time is it? 7:09. We also have on the agenda under board discussion is 44 Main Street, and you have materials in your package here regarding that. There's a permit online, or just a special permit?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. Okay, so it's just a special permit?
permit.
Right. Okay, so there's special permit materials that have been filed, and it shows the plans for what is being proposed at 44 Main Street, which is one commercial unit and 6 residential units with 2 bedrooms. The drawings that you have in your handout show elevations, renderings, site plan, and floor plans. This is all just a heads up. We've received the information, and because it's more than 3 units in the mixed-use district, it's going to be the subject of a special hearing, a special permit, And we will be opening that public hearing next meeting, which is on the 18th. So that's scheduled for 7, we scheduled that for 7, I think.
7:15.
So 7:15 on the 18th, 2 weeks from tonight, we will open that public hearing. It's been advertised, and so it's queued up to go. So 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be having the hearing on this for a special permit for more than 3 residential units in the downtown district.
So if in the downtown district, we can now do our MBTA, sizing, does it still require a special permit? I mean,
Yeah, we haven't changed that.
a special permit no matter what, even if they're allowed to do a greater density.
But what's required in the bylaw is, what's allowed in the bylaw under mixed use is 1 non-residential and up to 3 residential. And so 4 or more residential requires a special permit.
Okay.
Can I add one more thing? Yep. Just one other thing. You should have in front of you the updated working copy, planning board working copy of Chapter 6. So that has all of the updates based on the recent town meeting that are going to be awaiting Attorney General approval, but for now at least you have the updated versions available, so that can replace completely what's in the blue folder already. If you see anything wrong, let me know.
There is nothing wrong. We also need to make a recommendation every 3 years. It's our turn to make a recommendation for the Board of Public Works. I have spoken to Nick Ellis, who is currently on the Board of Public Works, and I believe he is sitting as chair of that board right now. He is willing and would like to fill the position for another 3 years. So we have the option to nominate 1 or 2 candidates. I don't know if anyone wants to nominate anyone else, but I will nominate Nick to be our it's not our representative, but our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for the Board of Public Works position. Do I have a second for Nick?
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor of nominating Nick Ellis for the position?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any updates from community preservation or strategic planning? No. Okay. Cross that off. We're just about ready to go for the public hearing, so in advance of that, not as part of the public hearing, what I would like to explain to planning board members and to members in the audience is that we will reopen the public hearing at 7:15, pick up where we left off. I do have a little statement to read that will talk about the process there, but the important thing too is that we will stop the public hearing at 8:30. If we finish comments and questions ahead of that, we will close the public hearing. If we're not done by 8:30, we will continue the public hearing once again to our next meeting, at which point it would have to be taken up after the public hearing for the 44 Main Street property. But we do have other business that the planning board needs to discuss tonight relative to this project, but not as part of the public hearing, which I will explain when we reopen the public hearing. But just so everyone's aware, that is how we're going to proceed, and we're going to be looking at that 8:30 cutoff. Other people online? Yeah. Oh. Alva, do you want to call into session? Because I guess you have people online? I'm the only one here, right? You have people online. Oh, yeah. People online. Sorry.
Calling the
No,
Board
you wouldn't know.
calling the Board of Selectmen in order. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it is 7:15, so I will take a motion to reopen the public hearing for the OSRD project at the end of Essex Park Road. I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. The planning board operates under the provisions of the Mass General Laws, Chapter 40 zoning, and Chapter 39 the open meeting law, and the Town of Essex bylaws, Chapter 6 zoning. To conduct this public hearing effectively and fairly, our process tonight will be as follows. First, after these opening remarks and brief review of outstanding issues from the Weston and Sampson peer review, the applicant will be allowed to make an uninterrupted presentation of additional information and their responses to the peer review comments. Second, we will entertain questions, first from consultant James Pearson of Weston and Sampson and Essex Town Planner Valerie Massard, who are both online with us tonight.
Yes.
And then from members of the planning board and members of the departments, boards, and committees named in bylaw section 6-8.6.2, and then from members of the public. And tonight we will hear from online participants first, and then from in-person participants. After questions have been answered or addressed, we will hear comments in the same order from online participants and from in-person participants. As the chair, I will recognize speakers and set time limits if necessary. To ask a question or to make a comment, online participants will please enter only your full name and address in the chat and then wait to be recognized by the chair, and Teresa will help me with that. Do not put questions or comments, please, directly into the chat, and please keep your microphone on mute throughout the hearing unless recognized to speak. In-person participants will please come to the podium and, when recognized, give their full name and address before asking a question or making a comment. Please speak close to the microphone. As you can see, this is what it needs. 6 inches away is good. We ask that you confine your questions and comments to the project that is the subject of this hearing and to matters that are under the jurisdiction of this board and are the subject of the public hearing. In addition, we ask that citizens inform themselves of the provisions of the laws under which we operate, and particularly the Essex zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw is available online at www.essexma.org, and hard copies can be provided if requested. Copies of the applicable Massachusetts general laws, MGL, may be searched online at malegislature.gov/laws/general laws. Documents for this project may also be found on the planning board page of the town website in the Essex Park Road OSRD information section, where all the materials are posted. After comments from the public, planning board members will be able to make final comments, and the hearing will be closed or continued until June 18, 2025. Please note that the public hearing will only be held, as I mentioned, through 8:30 this evening, and if questions or comments are not concluded by that time, the hearing will be continued. The planning board has other matters to discuss relative to this project that have a deadline, and we need time to address these. Although we may disagree on the issues raised, everyone present at this meeting is expected to be civil to all others present, both during the meeting and afterwards, while on town property as well. Those who do not act in a civil manner or who engage in rude or disruptive behavior will be asked to leave. Furthermore, this hearing with the opportunity for public comment is not the venue to discuss topics outside of the subject matter at hand, which is only the special permit application. As a refresher from our last meeting where we opened the hearing, please let me reinforce that it is being held regarding only the application for a special permit to allow an OSRD instead of a conventional subdivision. Any property owner has the right to subdivide their land per MGL Chapter 41, parts of which are the subdivision controls law, the state's subdivision control law, and the Town of Essex zoning bylaw, and the rules and regulations relative to subdivision control. The reason for the special permit is to allow the OSRD instead of a conventional subdivision. An OSRD allows smaller lots in exchange for permanently protected open space. Concurrent with the special permit hearing, the planning board is considering their review of the preliminary OSRD subdivision plan, which needs to be completed by June 21st, and is a separate process from the special permit. Therefore, some of the material presented this evening by the applicant and some of the discussion with our peer reviewer may focus on aspects of that plan that are not necessarily going to be part of any special permit that might be written, but which are relevant to the planning board's review of the preliminary OSRD subdivision plan, which is not part of this hearing. Thank you for your continued engagement. So that said, in our last meeting, we had gone through the peer review to some extent with James Pearson of Weston and Sampson about some of the outstanding issues. And since then, the applicant has resubmitted the drawings. You can see here is it's a June 2nd revision of the drawings where some minor changes have been made to the drawings to address some of the comments that were made in the peer review process. And the applicant has also submitted a memo that details responses to each of the comments made by the peer reviewer. So we're trying to be very thorough and walk through each comment and the responses to those. What is that? Oh, I just didn't know if is there a sound issue or is it?
It's a motorcycle outside.
Sorry, I'm deaf. So that said, I'm going to ask James online if he has anything that he wants to mention or point out ahead of time. And you don't have to if you don't want to, but if you have anything that you want to share with us, James, now would be the time. Otherwise, I will turn the meeting over to Will Skuda, who is going to present to us the changes that have been made. And I have all of the documents here on my computer, and I can put them on the screen for both people on Zoom and people in the room to see. So as we need different documents, either James or Will, let me know, and I will try and make sure they appear on the screen.
Thank you. I'm perfectly happy if Will wants to go ahead and proceed with his presentation.
Go ahead, Will. Just be careful with the microphone, because if you're not close enough to it, the recording doesn't capture what you're saying, because I watched the video from last time, and people who were too far away from the mic, it was not good. It was hard to hear, so we really do need to.
Okay, understood. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
Will Scooter from the Mooring Camera Group. I apologize I wasn't able to be here in person last meeting. There's some things that are out of my control, unfortunately, but thanks for bearing with me through that process. So, as mentioned, we received the peer review letter. We put a response together for that and revised the plans accordingly. There was no substantial changes to the plans, but I'll quickly go over what we did modify on those plans. The first thing, we corrected Lot 27. There was an area that did not have the 10,000 square foot requirement per the definition. That was a Scrivener's error on our part, a drafting error. We just corrected that, so that is now compliant. The second thing, we did add, as requested, underground electric line kind of throughout the subdivision, just showing that the intent is to have underground utilities.
So let me just back up 1 sec. So the lot 27 was on the conventional plan, correct?
Correct.
And the utilities are on the proposed OSRD plan?
Correct.
Thank you.
We also move forward. FEMA is going to be, or they have released pending maps that are going to be effective July 8th, 2025 this year. So we move forward because we're in June right now, and we updated that FEMA line on our plan. It did change slightly based on what they provided. So we basically take that line and we put it on our plan based on the Zone A elevation. So that is now reflected on our plans with the most current. Even though it's pending, it will be effective next month. We also added a calculation on the plans just showing the uplands that are within the open space. So on that table that we have the calculations, you'll see that we actually broke down that number, and we also gave the value of the total uplands on the area percentage as it's required to be at least 50%. So we do now comply with that, and it's shown on the plan.
So you're talking about the lot area calculations?
Correct, yep. So on that, you'll see there's a line item that basically shows that the upland open space is 31.9 acres, which is 52.6% of the total upland on the property. As again, reminder, the requirement's 50%, so we exceed that 50% threshold. We also went ahead and added some easements. There was questions about some of the stormwater basins and the septic. So we did show that those will have easements surrounding them. We do plan to proceed to request that they are included within the open space calculation. I think there was questions about if that's in the open space, who would be the manager. So for stormwater, for example, and the septic, it will be operation and maintenance will be the homeowner association's responsibility. So in order to give them rights to manage those areas, we would have an easement within that open space. We also noted the types of open space. It's really kind of approximate, but as you know, most of this area is wooded. So we just call that kind of a wooded recreation area versus kind of an open recreation area where the septics will be. So that there was a question in the response about where the recreation area, kind of an open field type area would be. The intent would be that would be kind of where the septic areas are. Currently, that's kind of the only area on the property that's not fully wooded. And with the septic areas, that would remain open forever. The last thing that we added on the plans is just a hydrant. It was a comment, so we did go ahead and proceed to add that hydrant at the end of Road C, just to make sure that we do show the intent of the water distribution system. This, again, if this project moved forward with this design, we would be coordinating with different departments in the town to make sure this is sufficient. So fire department, we would talk to them and make sure that the hydrant locations are good and they're okay with where they are. Part of the package, we also submitted a supplemental materials section. The first thing is going to be the sketch depicting the upland and the non-upland areas. So this kind of highlights what the definition of the upland and versus the definition of the resource areas, more or less. So although most of them are wooded, in the areas there's still the open space, but that's in riverfront, so that actually counts as jurisdictional as non-upland area. So that's why some of those lines, they're actually not the resource area, but by the definition, it is a resource area. Second, we submitted the FEMA flood zone sketches. We showed both the FEMA line, the new FEMA line on the conventional as well as the OSRD. I just want to note that on the OSRD that all work is completely outside of the FEMA zone. It's about a 6 to 8 foot vertical at the closest location where we have grading, and it's about approximately 100 feet or so away. I know there was questions about the relevancy of us filling floodplain. We are not filling or proposing to fill any floodplain. We're completely outside of that area. The floodplain actually goes under Essex Park Road, kind of right when you come in. There's a bridge there. There was a request a couple meetings ago for an aerial plan. So we just overlaid, just so you guys could have it and see kind of both the conventional and the OSRD subdivision overlaid onto an aerial. You can clearly see the gas easement. So as you remember when we walked out there, that's basically clear cut all the way through. So that kind of just gives you an idea of where that gas easement is relative to the developments. We also submitted the 2013 approved preliminary plans. These plans include grading of the entire site, a stormwater design, and the profiles for the constructability. So we're requesting that this was going to get reviewed for the feasibility of our conventional plan, so our approved plan. We also submitted Kinder Morgan has a developer's handbook. They're the owners of the gas easement. So within that developer handbook, I think it should clarify some of the what we can do and what we can't do. It clearly shows that you're allowed to do what we're proposing. There's just certain criteria that you need to comply with. Again, this is something, if we move forward, we will be proceeding to discuss our development with Kinder Morgan to make sure that we comply to all their regulations. And the last thing that I did submit is just the soil testing logs. These are on file with the Board of Health. As mentioned, we did an extensive soil testing for the septic only. So these were targeted soil test locations that we performed for the septic. We have not gone throughout the whole site. I know there's questions about where the road was, but that's something that would come later if we move forward. We can actually target exactly where we need to go find soils and the estimated seasonal high groundwater. There was a couple items that I just wanted to quickly go over that have been brought up, that were brought up in the letter and I think at the last meeting as well. So one of them is the intent of the open space. Our intent at this moment is to give the land to a nonprofit organization that would basically be in charge of that open space. We haven't started any discussions because it's all dependent basically on this special permit, whether we move forward with this. So if we get a special permit, that's when we would start engaging with nonprofit organizations. There's a few out there, Greenbelt. We could even talk to the Conservation Commission in town. So we haven't started those conversations until we kind of have a feeling if this project's going to move forward. We just don't want to waste anyone's time if this project goes a different route. The next item is going to be regarding the impervious areas and kind of the requirements that we're going to be requesting. So because this is an OSRD, the zoning regulations have a 25% maximum impervious coverage calculations. Part of the OSRD, the planning board can grant relief to that, which we will be seeking, as our lots are definitely undersized compared to a conventional lot. For example, the conventional lot is 40,000 square feet for a single family house. You're allowed to alter 25% of that with impervious area, but with our reduced footprints or reduced lot areas, that percentage is going to have to, we're thinking it will have to increase, and we're going to request relief. Again, this is something that will be more defined as this progresses forward. So we would have percentages for each lot if we go to the next step at the definitive. There's also a 15% impervious area in the Water Resource Protection District. This would require a special permit for us to get relief. This is something, again, that we would move forward with at the definitive process if we go to that next step. It should be noted that for a 40,000 square foot lot, having 15% of impervious area is about 6,000 square feet. So with the smaller lots, 6,000 square feet on a 10,000 square foot minimum lot would be about 60%. So we don't know what those numbers are going to be, but we are going to most likely be moving forward with a special permit if we move to the next step here. And the last item, there was definitely discussion at the last meeting kind of regarding the hazardous waste site that was next door at 7 Essex Park Road. This was also discussed last night. The Conservation Commission discussed some of the items that the Planning Board requested for their comments. They also requested, or are going to be requesting, a Phase 1 environmental site assessment. So this is something we're moving forward with kind of already. We started to solicit some different companies that do this work. I'm not an LSP, so I can't answer a lot of these items that are related to the hazardous waste, but we are coordinating at the moment to engage somebody that this is their professional to see exactly what's out there, if there are any risks, if we're going to impact this property. So that's kind of all I have. I can go through the letter, but there's a lot of items that we're deferring to for the definitive process. I think they were just noted as part of the review. So I will answer any questions if you have any.
Board members, do you have questions for the applicant?
Did you do a calculation of the impervious percentage of the conventional yield plan?
We didn't do a percentage for that, but we would be allowed for a minimum each lot at least 6,000 square feet.
So I would think we would need to verify that you could get it within the 15% or the 2,500 square feet. Right.
It would fully comply to all dimensional regulations. We haven't done that math, but that's something that we would, if we move forward, we would make sure, obviously, to get a building permit, you need to comply to all the regulations.
Mm-hmm. And I also had a question, I think, for our engineer. The bylaw says 2,500 square feet or 15% of the lot area, whichever is greater. Your comment says the proposed land uses in the single-family residential subdivision will render the impervious more than 2,500 square feet of lot area. And I just was curious if that lot area is after the subdivision or prior to the subdivision, based on your indication here.
So all of the numbers that we're calculating would be after the subdivision.
And so is it at all relevant whether it's 15% of the total lot area prior to the subdivision? In other words, should we be using 15% of the lot to do our calculations?
So which comment are we looking at when we're talking about the 15%? Because we also had a criteria for 25%.
I'm looking at
Are you looking at the conventional plan,
the conventional plan.
which is what I have up here now?
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me get to that.
If we look at, if we look at the Water Resource Protection Overlay District, and we're looking at
Number 7.
7, yeah, number 7 says rendering impervious more than 2,500 square feet or 15% of the lot area, whichever is greater, will require a plan for recharging stormwater runoff such that it will not degrade water quality. And this whole list in section B here is for uses that are permitted by special permit, subject to the approval of the special permit granting authority, which is the planning board. So I think Simone's question is, are we, this is unclear when it comes to subdivisions, because the subdivision is right now 3 different lots, and at some point it would become, in a conventional subdivision plan, there would be 30 lots here, and in the OSRD plan, there would be essentially 37 lots with 36 OSRD, and then the open space parcel. So, I don't know, James, if this is a question you're comfortable answering. I'm also more than happy to take that to town council to get clarity on this, because it does seem, when we talk about lot, is it before or after or both kind of question, I think.
Val's trying to.
Val, I'm sorry.
I'm just letting you know.
Okay, go ahead, Val. Val.
Okay. Working in other communities, it would be unusual to be looking at the individual after development lots. Normally, you'd be saying that you have 15% impervious as you get started on the design of the development, whether it's a subdivision as a conventional or as an OSRD. Like, either way, you're looking at the entire lot and saying 15% impervious is what's allowed in the end of whatever's designed. Does that help?
I think so. So you're saying we do also need to look at the entire 84.5 acre parcel to make those calculations as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That
All right,
answer?
yeah. So that means that they would have to give us a calculation on the conventional yield plan.
They need to, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for weighing in on that too, Val. And as I've been sitting here thinking about that, I think that rings true, because really the thing here that is subject to the special permit is really the whole subdivision in its entirety and not an individual subdivision lot. And so it would make sense that this would be applicable to the pre-subdivided lot in that case. It's interesting because, the special permit regulations, I think, are really written and geared more towards, if you have like a commercial development maybe on a single lot, and then you're kind of tackling it that way. But since this is a subdivision,
Can you speak up, please? Sorry.
Sorry, we can't, so I didn't hear that last part, James, if you could speak up and repeat
Yeah.
that.
So I'm saying that it seems like the special permit process is typically geared towards if you're sort of doing like a, if you could imagine maybe just like a commercial development on a parcel as opposed to a whole subdivision. So given that this is a whole subdivision though, it seems like this is probably more applicable to the pre-subdivided lot and have it calculated that way.
Okay. So to complicate that question, this parcel is actually 3 lots.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where that goes.
Val's ready.
Again, if I may,
Sure,
The-
please.
there should be a coincidental application for the special permit for the water quality aspect of this at the same time as the filing for the special permit for the OSRD. Like it shouldn't be something that follows later. In terms of when they get started, if they're going to do an OSRD, they should also be asking for the special permit at the same time for the site as one contiguous area that's being developed. And I just want to say, I'm sorry I'm wearing a Miami Dolphins shirt.
Can I ask another question? Okay. What is the status of the property if you give it away? Are you saying you're going to actually deed it away?
Are you talking about the open space portion?
Yes.
Correct, yeah. So that would be the entity that holds ownership would be hopefully a nonprofit is what we're looking to do.
And so that would mean that the subdivision itself no longer has the extra 70% open space.
They wouldn't have fee ownership of it. No, that would be held by a different entity.
Yeah, I'd like, do you have a read on that, Lisa?
Val.
Or Val?
Yeah, Val's
Val?
That's a common practice. That's a common practice. Although I do want to caution the developer that usually there's an endowment of some sort that's needed along with the gifting of the land to the nonprofit that would take over. What I think you're talking about would be like a land trust. And of course, that would count as the 70% open space and would be permanently restricted from being developed as part of A, the subdivision being recorded with the land and running with the land, and B, the format of the ownership by the land trust would, we'd anticipate have a conservation restriction of some kind on it to permanently restrict that land and go above and beyond the 33-year open space that would be set aside in terms of the development itself.
Thanks.
So to clarify, Simone, to your question, I think what you're asking is if 70% of the parcel is put in open space restriction, does that still count as part of the parcel when they're making the calculation for 15% of the overall area?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah. And Val, you're saying it would?
yes.
That's part.
And it would be
part-
how it's distributed, like how they've legally done it. Yep.
That's
what
why
we
they
have-
should apply before the, for the whole thing all at once for all aspects.
Board members, any other questions for Will, James, or Val at this point? What I do want to say too is that, again, I know this is a really confusing process, and it's the first time we've been through it, and I will just take a minute to try and clarify the difference in the two processes that we need to undertake. And the reason for the hearing and the special permit application is to essentially authorize the applicant to grant them the right to pursue an open space residential development. And the things that we need to demonstrate, or they need to demonstrate, and we need to verify in that process is whether the conventional subdivision plan does indeed prove out the number of conventional lots that they say it does, which is the 30. And then looking at the open space plan, we need to verify the amount of open space, because then that informs the number of lots that they would have the ability to develop in the open space plan. So that is really the gist of the special permit, is to essentially authorize the OSRD based on those calculations. And then separately, because they have submitted a preliminary subdivision plan, and it's a little cart before the horse, but there's not really any other way to do this. They've submitted the preliminary subdivision plan for the OSRD, and when an applicant submits a preliminary subdivision plan, the clock immediately starts ticking. So on April 16th, we received those documents at our meeting. We had a 45-day window, which took us to the 31st of May, and we've gotten 2 extensions, which take us to the 21st of June to complete the review of the preliminary subdivision plan. All that said, the review of the preliminary subdivision plan is a completely non-binding, non-enforceable kind of, it's more of a handshake in saying that, yes, you have proven out most of this stuff, and in our review, we have the ability to point out other things that will need to be addressed in a definitive subdivision plan, which is the binding document. Our conditional approval, or whatever we would potentially issue for the OSRD, is not granting the right to the development at that time. So, and that's what we're going to be talking more about after we close the public hearing this evening, because that's the one with a deadline. The special permit process allows a 90-day window after the close of the public hearing. We're not going to hopefully take 90 days to deliberate about that, because we have other things to do. But the point being is that the clock on the preliminary plan review is already ticking, and that's the deadline we need to meet first. And then after we're finished that process, then we'll deliberate more about the special permit at our next meeting also.
For the OSRD.
For the special permit for the OSRD. So what's going to happen is we're going to do a preliminary plan review for a type of subdivision that has not yet officially been granted the right to do, and that's going to be the first thing we say in our review, is like, this isn't official yet, so here's the review with that caveat. Cart before the horse some, but the process is they need to submit the preliminary subdivision plan to be able to prove out the open space area, which informs, along with a conventional yield plan, the number of OSRD lots. So that's why we're running the reviews concurrently, because there's not really any other way to do it. Okay, so planning board, any other questions at this time? We'll circle back again at the end of this anyway. So that said, I don't know if there are any members of the Department of Public Works, Board of Health, Conservation Commission, Open Space Planning Committee, Fire Department, or Police Department who have questions at this time. We'll take questions first. I'd like to try and answer all the questions before we move into comments again. Anyone online or in person? Dave?
Hello, Dave Perrine, Town of Essex Fire. Access from Turtleback, would there be a guarantee of continuous maintenance and the ability to support our fire trucks weight-wise? Who would be responsible for maintenance? The OSRD arrangement is not the most beneficial thing for public safety or firefighting. You're creating 3 basically dead-ended roads, limiting access in only one direction to these homes. Homes become tight in quarters. Firefighting would become difficult. Truck placement would become difficult. And would we be able to get a guarantee of underground utilities only due to this cluster zoning to limit our use of a ladder truck with overhead wires?
So it is actually, it's all underground utilities.
Just a little further
Well,
back.
they mentioned that they had planned on it. Would there be a guarantee of it?
That It would be a guarantee of it because that's something that would be part of the definitive subdivision plan and would be required.
All right. Just for, public comment also, the conventional plan is much more user-friendly to the fire service than the OSRD. Would give us access in more than one direction instead of limiting ourselves to dead-end streets. Just a comment of access and selfishness due to our wants of, being able to access things. Approach any structure in multiple directions is always a benefit to us.
Thank you. Just for the record, would you be able to put those in writing for us?
I can get them to you.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
I'll get them and we'll send them over from the Board of Engineers.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you, Dave. Anyone else online or in the room here?
Lisa, real quick though, no, I'm right here, Matt. Can we just get, is there a possible response from Will or anybody to Dave's first part of that question though, the maintenance? The
Sure, go ahead,
maintenance,
Will. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, with regards to maintenance, that's something that would be wrapped into the homeowner association portion. So whoever's plowing for the roads, that's something that will be written into the homeowner's requirements. Just like a typical getting your roads plowed, they're going to have to plow that access easement. So and maintain it, if the gravel, or if we have gravel and it blows out, somebody's going to have to maintain that as if it's a regular road.
And who's responsible for maintaining the part that's off of Turtleback?
I'm not sure what you mean by
So
that.
you're coming up a private road to your subdivision at that point? And so who would be responsible for maintaining that?
That would be the Turtleback residents. We would be responsible for the access easement portion of this.
Mm-hmm. Was that part of your question at all?
Yeah, I mean, that would have to be fully maintained by someone.
And should it be maintained?
From start to finish.
And should it be maintained at this time already?
Dave, you're not on the mic, so we can't hear you. Sorry.
The little bit that we do go up there, it appears to be somewhat maintained currently on the Turtleback end. I wouldn't consider it maintained and adequate to service a whole nother subdevelopment. You can enter it, surely. Would it at this time be adequate for a 60,000 plus pound fire truck? Don't know. That would be a road engineer or something like that would have to come up with that type of answer for us. But it would have to be maintained from end to end. Who is responsible for it on which end? Would have to be something that they would have to work out. I have another, question. Another question. The water system for this, would the developer be applying for the town to accept the water system and take ownership of it? If not, who would be responsible for maintaining the water system and also the insurance that hydrants and things were always in working order? Town currently, maintains their hydrants. If it's not accepted by the Department of Public Works, who's going to, maintain the water system? If there's a break, if there's a broken hydrant, who's responsible for that?
The intent, Will, do you want to address that, please?
So we have not had those discussions with DPW yet. That's something we will definitely be discussing with them, who has ownership, but the idea is to loop that water main and get a better connection for both Western Ave and Turtleback. So haven't quite got to that step, but we will plan on talking to them.
But the intent is to tie into town water.
Correct,
So-
would be to connect the main at Turtleback into the main on Western Ave or Essex Park Road. So we'd
Right.
be creating one loop of that water system, which improves the water quality and firefighting needs of the entire system.
And the hydrants work off of that.
Yeah.
Anyone online?
A public member, not a department board or committee member.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's any other board or committee members, but if there's not, then we'll move on to questions from the public online, please.
Have Jack Gale at 105 Pond Street.
Okay, so,
You just say you recognize him.
yeah, I recognize Jack Yell.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
We can hear you, we can't see you, but we can hear you.
That's all right. Don't need to see me. I have a few questions, and if you don't mind, I'll ask them one at a time and wait for your answers. And I just think it might be easier to keep track of that way.
Could you
So-
do us a favor, Jack, and let us know who you want to answer your questions, please?
Well, yes, although I think that all of these are addressed to the planning board as a whole. I'll let you know if I change my mind. Can you tell me what the decision was about the inclusion of the drainage areas in the calculations as open space? And what about other man-made or altered areas like roads, sidewalks, the septic areas, parking areas, septic systems, what is and what is not included in the calculations for open space?
Will, could you address that, please?
Okay, I would like the planning board to answer that.
Well, we need to hear from Will what he has determined is
Right.
in the open space.
This is part of the discussion because the planning board has the ability in the OSRD section to consider these areas that you're talking about, whether they be drainage basins or the septic area, to be part of the open space if they are, quote, soft, if they are not hard structures, if they look like open space, and if they can act like open space as far as natural soil, I believe, is the distinction there. So we have not had that discussion as a board about whether we're accepting those or not. That's part of the discussions that the board will have after the hearing, but it is something that is on our list to talk about.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. I think that would be of interest, well, at least to me. I'll move on to number 2, and this is to the planning board. Is the planning board satisfied with the dimensions and areas on the plans as to the setbacks, lot sizes, everything relating to either a conventional subdivision or the OSRD? And have the calculations been reviewed by the planning board or someone else who's independent? That's the end of that question.
So as part of this process, because a lot of what needs to be reviewed is not necessarily the type of work that the planning board members as individuals are either familiar with or qualified to do. As part of the process, we, as funded by the applicant, hire a peer reviewer. So online we have James Pearson, who is from Weston and Sampson, who has reviewed, he and his staff have reviewed the plans, and they have prepared the 21-page memo that is on the website for people to review.
I'm familiar with that. I read that and was impressed with it. I did not know that that was an independent entity, however, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so that they are our technical eyes and ears on this. We're looking at it from a conceptual point of view and relying on Weston and Sampson to have essentially run the numbers for us. Not that we wouldn't look these over to the best of our abilities, but we are not all trained civil engineers like James is and his staff, who have the depth and the knowledge to check these things that need to be verified. So to look at the conventional subdivision plan and verify that, yes, all the lots are the proper size, they meet the setbacks, that sort of thing. Same with the OSRD. So it's sort of double duty on this, but anyway.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's great.
Can I?
Okay.
So Val, our town planner who works with the planning board, has a comment on this, please?
I'll also be doing a summary review for the board.
Great.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Also to the planning board, the length of the road does not conform, and for that, the developer wants a waiver. Now, is this for the fire department access only and the use of the fire department? And what does the town get in return for this? It certainly doesn't seem to benefit the people on Turtleback Road.
You're saying that the emergency access drive does not benefit the people on Turtleback?
Well, since they'd be driving through Turtleback Road presumably to get to the upper end of this development, or does it work in reverse? Would they be driving through this development to get to the upper end of Turtleback Road? Is that the conception?
It would be a two-way street. So, so that my understanding of what's proposed in the OSRD, just to step back a minute, if we look at the conventional subdivision plan that is used as the yield plan, they're showing a full road through. So it's a connecting road to Turtleback across an easement that was established for this purpose. And that would be a regular road that the public, and it would be a regular road. And this is also, this configuration of the road in the conventional yield plan is the same as the preliminary subdivision plan, and this plan is from 2012, that was submitted in 2012. So it's virtually the same road with the same through road between the end of Turtleback and the loop road that would be in the conventional subdivision plan. So that was sort of the baseline of the conventional plan. And then what's proposed in the OSRD is just an emergency access drive that does link Turtleback to the end of the dead ends in the subdivision, with the intent of it being a two-way emergency access drive. So because it's an emergency access drive, the way my understanding of how it would be used is if there is an emergency on the roads in the OSRD area, the typical way to access that is off of Western Avenue, down Essex Park Road, and into the subdivision that way. Similarly, under normal conditions, Turtleback Road would be accessed from Apple Street the way it is now. The only reason to use the emergency access drive would be if a tree falls across the end of Turtleback and someone needs to get to Turtleback, the fire and police could get through the emergency access drive to the end of Turtleback if the other end of Turtleback is blocked off. Similarly, if something goes across the road on Essex Park Road and there's an emergency in the subdivision area, emergency personnel could respond down Turtleback through the emergency access drive to the subdivision. Is that correct, Will? Jack, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Okay, my last question, just this evening, I think it was Will who mentioned that the soil testing will be done, or soil testing was done for the septic areas. So my question was, so far, is that just for perks, or were they tested for toxicity? And does this stage 1 environmental assessment include testing the areas adjacent to the toxic site next door, which is adjacent to the septic areas? That is, are the areas going to be tested for toxicity that has escaped the corralled area that belongs to the property next door?
Yes.
My concern about this is that if septic systems are built, there's a large amount of material that's going to be excavated, and it's not unusual for excavated material to be used elsewhere on the property. So I think it's important that the developer and the town and the Board of Health understand what the status is of that area on the developer's property.
Before you answer, Will, can I ask Val? Val has a comment here, please.
Well, I just wanted to mention that they're hiring the LSP, which is the licensed soil professional, to do the Phase 1 ESA, which would determine whether or not there's any potential for the need to do testing. And that is called a Phase 2 ESA. So it's going to be up to that licensed soil professional who hasn't done work yet to test for contaminants. But so they've only been testing for perks.
So will this be a requirement of either the planning board or the conservation commission?
The LSP's Phase 1 should be, they have a huge liability when they do this work. Licensed soil professionals are highly trained, and they are going to be obligated to make the determination whether or not there's any possibility of the need for doing what's called a Phase 2 environmental assessment, which is where they would actually go and do the borings in the soil. So there's no answers yet because they need to do that work. But yes, of course, making sure that they follow through with the Phase 1, and if necessary, a Phase 2 would be a condition of approval.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have for tonight.
We look forward to hearing more from you, Mr. Gale. Thank you. Appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Other online questions?
Nobody else has their name and address in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Anyone in the room have questions? Do you want to come to the podium, name and address, and go from there?
Hi, Alvin Guerrero. I'm speaking as a resident, not a Board of Selectmen. Just a couple of questions I have. One is, as far as the board, how are you going to determine between a conventional and a OSRD? Have you got a criteria that you're going to use, or?
We aren't making the decision. The applicant has applied for the OSRD. And part of the OSRD process is that they have to prove through a conventional plan how many lots they could build. And that establishes how many they can build in the OSRD or develop in the OSRD. Don't build a lot. I know that. So that's the point of the conventional plan, which is called the yield plan. They're not proposing the conventional plan now. Worth noting that if for whatever reason the OSRD did not go forward, the applicant still has the right, like they did in 2012, to develop this conventional plan, which would put 30 larger lots in a through road to Turtleback. So the point of the conventional plan is just to proof the parcel and determine the baseline number of lots that would be permitted. And that's part of the OSRD bylaw. That's a requirement of it. So then the next step of that is that the OSRD plan is then laid out and evaluated, and the percentage of open space is the thing that we're looking at here with respect to the special permit for an OSRD. So the minimum requirement is for an OSRD is that 50% of the open space must be, or 50% of the lot or the parcel must be put into open space. If they put 10% more, if 60% of the parcel is put into open space, then they may request a 10% increase in the number of lots. So with 60%, where the yield plan has theoretically proven 30 lots, and we'll be talking as a board about that, with the 30 lots, then that would mean they would be able to do 33. In the proposal that's in front of us, they have demonstrated 71% of the parcel is in contiguous open space, which entitles them to the maximum of a 20% increase. So the 30 conventional lots would then allow them to have 36 smaller OSRD lots. And that is the proposal that's in front of us for the OSRD. So we're not right now looking at the conventional as anything other than the proof plan.
Okay, so there is no, I mean, I'm just confused as to whether or not there's pros and cons with anything we build, whether it's OSRD or it's conventional. have we thought about those as the pros and cons for the town of Essex?
We're not making that determination because it's not in front of us. They haven't applied for a conventional plan. They've applied for the OSRD. So that's our role, is to review what they've asked to build.
Okay, and then my other question is regarding the OSRD, and there seems to be a lot of variances or special permits they're requesting. I just went on the website. I didn't see any list that list all of those. Do I have to just listen to the recordings to get that?
No, we're going to be, well, so there is one, the special permit that's required to develop the OSRD is the point of this particular hearing. Then the other ones that we're talking about would be waivers, relief, or variances for going ahead with the OSRD. So those will appear in our minutes. They will appear in whatever we write about the preliminary plan review. But just to recap what those are, is that this entire parcel is in the Water Resource Protection Overlay District, which caps the impervious area of the site of a property at 15%. And that can be waived by the planning board as a special, not waived, but relief given to that by the planning board as a special permit granting authority to allow more than 15% coverage if there's a good reason, or if there's a recharge system that's put into place. So the plan that's in front of us shows a recharge system for each proposed lot that has a roof collection system off to the side. So you will see on these plans that for each sort of, these dwellings are shown at 40 by 80, which is large, but then they show off to the side here, you can see proposed subsurface roof recharge. So what they would be asking for is a special permit for relief from the 15%. And in considering that, we would be obviously looking at the roof recharge system, and the fact that because this is an open space residential development, we're looking at an 84.5 acre parcel that is 70% open space. So even though the lots are smaller and the construction and the lot coverage is more dense, in the aggregate, there's still probably more open space in a OSRD than there would be in a conventional subdivision plan. So that's the background on that. There is a waiver that they are asking for about the dead-end road, with the fact that there's a connector public safety access drive there. So that is a waiver in the subdivision process that the planning board has the authority to grant if we feel it is in the best interest of the town overall. And then what was the other one? Well, there was one more. 30-foot parking. The 30-foot parking. So the way the OSRD subdivision works is that all of the setbacks that are given for a normal lot in Essex are cut in half. So our bylaw requires a 25-foot front yard setback. So the OSRD allows a 12.5-foot front yard setback. And the part of the OSRD that references that goes back to the definition, the dimensional table in the general use district, which is where this property sits. There is another, in a strange place, parking requirement that says that parking shall be 30 feet from the front lot line. And this is something that we're looking at, but because it's hard to nod your head. So, but that's in a different place. So the OSRD sends you to the dimensional table for the general use district. The parking requirement lives over here and was not captured by the OSRD. So right now we're looking at a house that can be set back 12.5 feet from the front yard, but you have to park 30 feet from the lot line. So this is the thing that the applicant would go to the ZBA for a variance. The planning board does not have the authority to change dimensions in the bylaw. Only the ZBA can do that.
So bringing up that parking, one last comment I have is in regards to, you know, when they first get built, it may be only 2 cars, but families grow and then all of a sudden there's 4 vehicles. So would it be able to handle that many vehicles for, you know, every house, whatever? Anyways, that was it.
Thank you.
Peter Ferrio, Rocky Hill Road.
Questions?
We're still doing questions, I think, unless who has questions?
These are questions
Okay,
prefaced
okay,
prefaced
great.
with a few
Great,
comments.
thank you.
I want to, thanks for your time. Thank you to Weston and Sampson for a nice review, because it begets a lot of questions. A lot of them you just referenced, Lisa. And I think that puts this in the very special category permit, very special permit. But my first question is, at the last meeting, I asked where the hazardous waste site was in relation to the development, and you didn't know?
What's the
No,
question?
do you know where it is now? Yeah. Okay. I think it had 288 barrels of hazardous waste. Almost 1 million pounds of soil was taken out. So where is the leach field now in relation to the development?
Can you move closer to the mic? I think she
Sure, I'm
can't hear
sorry.
you. Thank you.
Where now would the leach field be in relationship to the development? Because that leach field could handle 13 to 15,000 gallons of sewage a day. And where is the leach field in relationship to the Alewife Brook?
If we'll
Well,
reprise.
yeah, well, you're going to need to go to a microphone to answer questions, please.
I'm aware of the general location of where the hazardous waste is. I can't really comment on anything with regards to that. I am not an LSP. That's why we're going to be hiring one to hopefully clarify some of these questions. The leach field is on our property. Relatively, it's about 200 something feet away, roughly, approximately. I don't know the exact number, but this is something that the LSP can hopefully help clarify some of your questions and comments on.
So a comment. This flows to the Essex River, which is the heart of our town. It's in a floodplain district, a water resource protection district, a wetlands protection overlay district, and I'm no expert on any of these categories. But 2 things I can tell you unequivocally. I'm no expert, period. I was a harbor master, I was a selectman, and I probably had my first clam license 60 years ago. But I can say 2 things unequivocally. That the river hasn't been treated well, and water and sewage drains downhill. So I think we're pushing the environmental limits of this, along with possibly bankrupting the school system. So my next question is, why so large in a small town like Essex? I think it's being a little greedy, and I think it needs to be downscaled. And I guess if I were a Jeff Jones, if I could ask this group here, Essex residents, anyone here in favor and anyone opposed? This is not good for the town of Essex. It's not good for the river. And I think I represent the voice of a lot of Essex residents. I know a lot of this isn't within your purview, Lisa, but I appreciate you giving me time, giving us time, because this needs to be opposed. Thank you very much.
Just for everyone's information, I have had a conversation with town council, and as far as the tasks that are in front of the planning board with both the review of the preliminary subdivision plan, which is the part of the process that is not a focus of the public hearing, and then the review of the plan, conventional and open space for the potential special permit to permit the open space residential development. The planning board, considering a hazardous site on an adjacent property is out of our purview for the decisions that we need to come through. Should this project move forward into a definitive subdivision plan, which is an actual plan for constructing something where all these things are explored and understood, that is the time when the Board of Health has to look at this, the Conservation Commission has to look at this from respect to understanding the impact. So I don't know if that helps put in perspective what both the planning board's responsibilities are and are not at this stage of the process. Questions?
Ruth Perrine, 15 Lufkin Street. I just have a very easy question, I think. There was a reference made to a homeowners association. Does that imply that this subdivision will be condoed like Lowland Farm?
I do not think it's condoed. It's a home. Maybe you can address this, Will. It's not. Each property is its own. I think Lowland Farm has houses that are condos on jointly held property, and I believe the intent here is that these are parcels that would be sold and then homes built on them, so that it's not condoed, I believe. But Will, if you want to address that, I don't know the details. Yeah, and Val has a comment too.
Well, my comment was it can be condoed, but this setup doesn't appear to be a condo. A homeowners association would be deeded the land and have officers and the ability to collect dues and fees to do the maintenance that would be required.
Yeah, to tag on to that, so this development, when I say homeowners association, it's for maintenance of the subdivision, the shared utilities that would be split. Lowland Farm is a homeowners association as well as condos. Those lots are large enough that they can support multiple houses on each lot. We don't have that area with this OSRD that we would be building up to 3 single-family houses per lot. So the homeowner associations put together, because it is a private development, similar to Turtleback, they're a private development that maintain their own roadways, their own sewer system, and those things. Any common elements would be within that homeowner association, but the houses themselves would be privately owned.
I will wait for comment section for the rest of my list.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello, Betsy Vixell, 2 Turtleback. Do we have an estimate for how long the road is going to be?
How long, I'm sorry?
How many feet the road will be? I know in previous meetings we've talked about the 1,200 feet. Sort of once it's longer than 1,200 feet, you really need to, that's more of an argument for the security, the access.
Right.
One sec, let me get my plans open. They're on the top right of that plan sheet that you have open. So currently proposed, Road A is 1,510 linear feet, Road B is 867, Road C is 273, Road D is 581, and the emergency access drive is 878.
Super. So I went online and looked at some maps of different lengths of roads, and I'm thinking about precedents and trying to clarify why we need the emergency access. Turtleback itself is over 2,000 feet. Rocky Hill Road, all of these are non-throughways. Rocky Hill is over 7,000 feet. Wood Drive, also over 7,000 feet. And Spring Street, 2,700 feet. Forest Street, 3,500 feet. And none of these roads have an emergency throughway, or there's no requirement or recommendation that there be some kind of emergency access built in. So I understand that saying we won't have a throughway to Turtleback, instead we'll just have this emergency access, is offered for the residents of Turtleback who are vehemently opposing any kind of throughway to our private road. But I think you said the emergency access road is 878 feet. So that's far below, any of these other dead-end streets in Essex that I just quoted, as well as below the 1,200 feet that we've been talking about before. So that's just one precedence I wanted to bring up. But then just earlier today, or this evening, you also said the reason to use this emergency access would be for a tree down. And is that the only reason? And, what do other roads that are dead end, that are long roads, do when they have a tree down? So I'd just like a little clarification about the recommendation for an emergency access and why that's important here and how that fits consistently with the other roads in town. Thank you.
Let me start by saying there's nothing consistent about anything in this town. So, I understand what you're saying about the dead-end roads. There are a lot of dead-end roads in Essex that don't have any kind of emergency access. What we're looking at and the standards that we need to work by, and the developer does also, are the Essex, Town of Essex rules and regulations relative to subdivision control. And in those, it says that a dead end can't be longer than 1,200 feet. So that is why the developer necessarily is proposing the emergency access to sort of take the onus off that, in that emergency access could be gained a second way. It's something the planning board could waive the 1,200-foot road requirement. That is in our authority in the subdivision rules and regulations. It's an interesting document because the first thing that the subdivision rules and regs say is that the planning board can waive any of these, but then it goes on to list all of the rules and regulations. But to waive something, it has to be in the public interest and to some benefit for the town. So even though there are a lot of dead-end roads in town, it doesn't mean it's an optimal public safety setup, and it's not necessarily the best way to protect town residents. So I think the planning board, and I can't speak for the other members, but I would want to see the emergency access road there if there is a dead end that's longer than the 1,200 feet. A lot of the other roads are much older and sort of established before subdivision control was accepted by Essex in the 1970s. So any road that predates the 1970s would not have had to conform to these standards. So, I know I live on a dead-end road, and at the end of my road, it floods. And so there are people who are down there who are doubly stuck. And it is a public safety concern if a tree does come down, and I say tree coming down because that obviously blocks the road, but you could have a water main burst and wash out the road. You could have a bridge problem, something like that. That there's any number of kind of natural disasters and or man-made disasters that could close a road. A fuel truck spills in a road or something. Who knows? But the point is, it would only be for those kind of emergencies that you would use that road. I'm getting the Val sign here. Teresa says Val has something to add, and I would love to hear from her.
Well, I think you covered it at this point. One of the things that emergency accesses are used for includes wildfires. And if there's a fire burning at one end, a good way to get out is having the alternative access. And that's often why the emergency access is thought about. A tree is a type of thing that could happen more frequently. A wildfire is something where you need a way out.
Thank you, Val. Any other questions?
Real quick. So, how you doing? Thanks. Lisa, I'm trying to stick to your permit versus planning kind of thing. So if I go astray, please let me know.
Name and address.
Frank Bafaro, 15 Turtleback Road, which if you look at the map, you'll see why this is of heavy interest to me. It's where this access road would come out. Two real quick questions. I didn't know if the intent in the plan for the permit was going to allow, during construction, access through that emergency access road. I don't know if that had been talked about, but I would like to understand if that is an intent in the development, because a lot of construction would be going on, and it take multiple years, of course. The second part of that question has to do with the longevity of the approval in the permit for an access road there, as opposed to someone coming back several years down the road and saying, it's time, once that community organizes, it's time to transfer this and make this a through road, right? I don't know what the permit might say. Those are the two questions. And the third one is, again, on the water main that we were talking about. I believe when I looked at the plan, it goes from Turtleback down that shared easement out into the back. There's a gas line on one side and a drainage easement on the other side of that road, and that whole road is ledge. So I don't know if that water main was going to be like digging up that entire area and laying down a new water main underneath that ledge and blasting. It would inconvenience the road terribly. I don't know if that's the plan for the water main. It's not really clear in the plan for the permit as to where that water main is going to go and how it's going to be. Just curious about those things. So.
Yeah, I don't know about the water main. What was it? Just to go back to your first question, I should have answered them as you went.
No, the first question was around just the construction access through the emergency access road.
So I think that in preparing a definitive subdivision plan, we would have the ability to say that construction vehicles cannot access the site through Turtleback. That's entirely reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
And then your second question was about...
Second question was around the longevity of the approval.
Can someday it turn into... So this is the kind of thing that gets recorded with the Registry of Deeds, and it is a part of the decision that's made about the property, and there wouldn't be an opportunity to change it. Val has something to say about that. Val?
There would be an opportunity to change it through what would be called a modification of either the definitive plan or the special permit, which would require a public hearing and all of the necessary review and procedures that we're taking now. If a special permit was granted for an OSRD, or if a definitive plan was approved, there is an opportunity to modify it in the future.
Great. Okay.
So it could be modified. If somewhere down the road they wanted to make that...
No matter how it's built, it could be modified. Whether it's a through road or whether it's an emergency access, any subdivision can be modified. Any special permit can be modified.
But it would go through the same process.
Yep, sounds like it. Thank you, Val. And the water main question, again, blasting near the gas line, drainage easement, shared driveway with ledge. Just curious how that comes together.
Yeah, we're a little early in the process to figure out exact constructability and where the location will be. The idea, we're showing the intent of connecting that, so that would be further evaluated as this process moves forward.
It is 8:33, and we have only gotten through the questions, and I do want to provide opportunity for the public to make comments, and unfortunately we are out of time because the planning board is hard up against another deadline. So I apologize to everyone online and in the room who wanted to make comments, but we are going to have to continue the public hearing until June 16th? 18th, I'm sorry, June 18th, 2 weeks from tonight. So I will take a motion from a member of the planning board to continue the public hearing on June 18th.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of continuing the public hearing to our next meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
To June 18th, at what time? Val reminded us last time.
It is going to have to be 8 o'clock at the earliest. So it will be, because we already have a public hearing scheduled for 7:15 on 44 Main Street. So it will be, if that wraps up in time, it will be at 8 o'clock. It will be no earlier than 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock or whenever the other public hearing wraps up.
And that's going to be, I think that's going to be a long one, too.
We're out of time. What's that? No, we're going to be staying on TV. Yeah. Yeah. No, we're here for the duration with the recording. So, folks, if you could chit chat in the hallway, appreciate it, because we're going to continue our meeting here, if you don't mind. All right. So, planning board members, have I adequately explained the difference between the special permit process that we've been talking about as part of the public hearing, and then the separate process that we also need to undertake, which is the preliminary subdivision plan review? Do you have any questions about that? Because the preliminary subdivision plan review is triggered by the applicant submitting a preliminary plan, which they have done. They've submitted the OSRD preliminary plan. The complication, what we have here is we have to review a preliminary OSRD plan under, like I said earlier, the big caveat across the top that says until such time as this OSRD receives a special permit for the right to go forward, that our comments are contingent on that.
So does that mean that you want us to hold our comments about the OSRD plan?
No, we're going to make them all now. We want to talk about...
You want to hear all our comments about both sides?
So the part of the special permit process, the conventional subdivision plan is part of the special permit process to prove out the OSRD. So as far as our review of the preliminary plan, we have to assume that it's okay, because we're going to caveat that in our decision. We have to assume that the conventional plan has proven that they have the right to the 36 lots. As
Yeah, can we pause there for a minute?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because saying that they have the right to 30 lots is not approving what we see on the OSRD as a 20% increase. Because I don't think that the stormwater features should be included. I don't think they should count as open space. I don't think that they meet the definition or the spirit of the OSRD. So that does not entitle them to 36 lots. I agree that they could build 30 in a traditional subdivision. So how do we get from they could build 30 to they could build 36? Because I don't think those two things are the same.
Val?
Go ahead, Val.
I think you're going to say that the plan shows that they could get up to 30 by right, if that's the decision that you make. Like, that's an example of how it would read. And I think what Lisa is articulating is that the goal here is that you would recognize what they're showing on the plan. And when Lisa is saying that you have to assume that it's okay, what you're going to do is condition it and say up to 30 has been shown to be met by what we know about it at this point. But as we go forward and we actually have all the information, it can't be more than the 20% added onto that, and it could be less. And that's part of the process that will help the developer decide whether they want to proceed with an OSRD or whether they want to proceed with a conventional subdivision.
Go ahead, Matt.
So conventionally, it looks like they're utilizing the emergency access road as access. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yes. It's allowed. That access road is allowed, and they are stepping back from that as a gesture to Turtleback. But
So
they
that access is through a private road.
This is a private road, too.
That's a question I have as well.
I'm just, that's boggling my mind, I guess, is that so now you have two homeowners associations taking care of roads, and now they're gonna be joined.
on someone else's property, basically.
Yes.
So, if I may, my question is, if they have an easement for this emergency access road, that mean, and they show that they're gonna put it in the conventional plan, that means they do have the right to reconstruct that road to today's standards, correct? So that if the entrance into Turtleback hasn't been maintained sufficient enough for the fire department to get their access vehicles down, they do have a right to upgrade that road.
Someone else's road.
Well, they have an easement on that road. That road is an easement that gave access to this property, I believe, right? So if they have that, then they should have the rights to upgrade that road and treat it as a regular road.
You're talking about the access road.
The access road. And you also remember that Turtleback has no other way in but one way in, so this does benefit Turtleback
So
to
you're
create that
saying
road.
theoretically, they could improve Turtleback because of their easement?
The property, the road that's
Or
on
just the
Turtleback
access?
easement access, not the roads in the Turtleback.
But just that little,
Just the access road, the portion of it that's an easement for that purpose.
So going from gravel to asphalt.
Yes.
and so that easement in perpetuity, could Turtleback ask them to maintain that portion of their road?
Yes.
Yes, I think that would be part of what we'd put in the special permit, is they must maintain that road.
I agree.
Sticking to the road.
Yep.
I know Dave just left, but a gravel road, that's fine for access, but when you get into plowing and, I just don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what, that use really is, I mean, maybe that's
yeah.
beyond our jurisdiction, but that,
Well, it's not. It would be something that we would talk about in the definitive subdivision stage, so it's out of scope really for the preliminary review.
Okay.
But that would happen in definitive review, and it's something that we would talk to the fire department about. There's a 7% grade on that road, and it's the kind of thing that we would understand what's proposed for gravel, or is it just a binder course, or who knows what's out there, but that would be something that we would have control over in the definitive subdivision plan, working with the fire department, police department, Board of Public Works, to make sure that we get a road that is sufficient and maintainable and isn't just going to grow weeds through it, so.
And legally, Lisa, they can access a private road like that? That's not an issue?
This property has a right, that has an easement. So the developer who developed Turtleback originally in 2 stages also is the original owner of this property, and that easement was granted, and it even says in the deed specifically for the access and development of this parcel. Those are things we'll definitely have council look at and verify for us in the process, and I can even do that before we make any decisions 2 weeks from tonight.
So theoretically, the fire department could counter their gravel access, basically.
The fire department could say, we'd be okay with it if you paved it. The fire department doesn't have to say that, but that's a discussion to be had with them.
Usually the standard has been to construct a road sufficient enough to carry an 80,000-pound vehicle. So it's not just a dirt road, it's going to be constructed with base, and same as you construct every road. Whether it's paved or not, that's up to, will be determined later on. I don't think it needs to be paved, but it needs to be constructed to requirements that will be sufficient.
If you guys recall when we did the house at the end of Spring Street, and it's only one house down there, but that gravel road had to be put into fire truck standards, and before we released that gentleman's final retainer, the fire chief had to go out there and, sort of bless the road and say, yes, we are good with this, we can get our engines down that road, so.
The other comment on the road I would suggest would be is that there's some type of electronic operation, so a card reader as such, so the emergency vehicles just have to flash a card to open the gate, instead of a key and a lock, as I think Wesley Burnham mentioned last time. They don't want to get out in the middle of the night and try to find a key for the gate. The technology's there now, and it shouldn't be a big deal to have a card operated that police vehicles, ambulances, and fire department have access to.
They can actually put those in the vehicles.
You actually have the technology having in the vehicles. When the vehicle approaches, it'll automatically open the gate, but that depends on what.
How many of those do they carry?
Huh?
What's that?
I mean, how many of those would they possibly carry? They have like a wallet full
Well,
of
the
them?
same thing. Some of them are in the vehicles themselves.
Are you saying it's
That's-
all the same one for all of the access things?
Yes.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would be, it could be put in the truck, so that you don't have to like, oh my God, did I remember my wallet with my card in it kind of thing, so the vehicles can actually be wired for that.
So that we'd want to look for police and fire to recommend what they would want in that instance. I don't know if they have other ones around town or not, but you want to make them similar, so again, you're not running around with 5 cards and trying to figure out which card it is.
So I want to go back to Beth's question about the 30 versus 36. That decision is part of the special permit process decision in evaluating what we would agree to for the OSRD. And the preliminary plan review is going to be contingent on that. And so we can clearly say that by us reviewing this plan that shows 36 lots is not our necessarily granting all 36 lots. That's dependent on the special permit. Our review of this is reviewing what they've submitted, which is 36. So we'll make our comments and whatever we have to say about the review based on the 36, but with the understanding that it is not granting the 36. It's not doing anything that needs to be done as part of the special permit process. We're reviewing the plan that's in front of us, and that caveat would go at the beginning of our review. Is that, because we have to, the preliminary plan review is a process wherein the applicant submitted these plans, and under subdivision control law, the planning board has 45 days to respond, and if you don't respond in 45 days, that is there's a word that Val will know, but that is an implicit acceptance of it. So no decision is a yes without any conditions. So go ahead.
And a
Val.
preliminary plan doesn't create a subdivision. A preliminary plan doesn't create anything except for a zoning freeze, which that's not why this is being filed. So it's really a planning document that typically is filed before a subdivision is filed if they want feedback from the planning board about what they like or don't like about that preliminary plan. And so you're not approving anything other than saying, yes, you've shown us that you could fit that there. And we don't find that, like you might come back after an analysis and say, gee whiz, you forgot to count the wetlands. And so now we're going to say that we only see 25 lots. That could come up. So that's not what we're seeing in this case, but that's an example. So you're saying that they've shown through the calculations and going through the measurements that this appears to make sense, but we're gonna reserve the right to actually review what we get when there's a filing. And this preliminary plan doesn't create any kind of development.
So in this plan, are we approving the impervious surface or no?
No, you're not.
So
you're not
none of that, none of the anything. It's just saying they gave us a plan. Okay, we'll look at it. Is that basically it?
Basically,
Either
so
one.
So in the normal subdivision process, the preliminary plan is an option for the developer. And if they submit a preliminary plan, we have 45 days for it. And then when they submit a definitive subdivision plan, we have 90 days for it. If a developer in a normal situation decides not to even bother submitting a preliminary plan, he can just submit a definitive plan and they get 135 days. We get 135 days with that definitive plan if we haven't seen the preliminary plan. Our OSRD bylaw requires the preliminary plan, so it's not an option for the developer anymore. It's a requirement because it's an OSRD, which there are, this is our first time through OSRD, and I can tell you there's some bugs I'm finding in the system that need to sort of be sorted out, because this is a bit of a cart before the horse thing, and I'm not sure how to resolve that, because right now we're talking about reviewing a subdivision plan that we haven't even said they can do yet.
Right.
So, it's a little cart before the horse, which is why our review of the preliminary plan is going to be caveated with those other things about the special permit.
Like, for example, he said tonight that he hasn't figured out about ledge and buildability. He's acknowledging that he hasn't established the buildability of the preliminary plan either. And we aren't establishing that either because we don't have that information. We're saying that feasibly, this appears to meet zoning, it appears to meet the subdivision criteria, but we're not saying that we agree that that's a buildable situation.
And so, like for instance, if the owner doesn't provide a calculation of the impervious surface that is suggested by the yield plan, and
So
we meet the end of our deadline, are we forced to vote without it? Is that basically what happens?
I will do some calculations on it myself, but typically, any kind of development uses about 15% of the lot for impervious surface, including like roads and drainage. So it's unlikely that they're going over that percentage, but once you add the houses and stuff in there, it does get a little tight. So by having a shorter road, an OSRD version, they might be able to get more than if they use a subdivision road, which is going to have a longer road. And I'm not clear that they've evaluated based on that information yet. I don't think that they've taken that into their calculations. I think this board should look at that. But usually when you take a conventional subdivision, you can assume 15% is being impacted for drainage and for impervious, both combined.
So in this,
They'll have some information.
in the conventional plan, even if they weren't at 15%, right, which we don't know because we don't have that calculation, they could propose permeable driveways, and they would certainly be under that, I think, for the total lot area. So, I mean, I guess my question is, the preliminary traditional subdivision has already been approved. There aren't many changes. It seems like they could certainly meet the zoning requirements here. So is there anything else that we need to look at on that plan to make this approval? Like, what are we concerned about on the preliminary plan?
For the conventional.
Yeah.
So that is going to be part of the conversation that we're going to take up in a little bit more depth when we're done the preliminary OSRD review, because that's part of the conversation for the special permit. But that said, I want to answer the question anyway. I'm just saying the conventional subdivision plan isn't going to influence our review of the preliminary plan. But the conventional subdivision plan, the questions that James had raised about the layout that was originally submitted to us was, it's a lot with a lot of topography going on there.
Right.
And James' concern was, does the conventional subdivision plan actually work? Would they be able to build that road? So this is on the screen now, is a set of plans that was submitted in 2012, reviewed by the planning board then and accepted then. And in this set of plans, you can see that this plan shows the full grading of the lots. So it shows 27 properties instead of 30, but it does all the grading around the roadways to develop the lots. And that's on this sheet, and then details on the next 5 sheets. And then the last 3 drawings here, these 3, they show the profile of the roadway. And it shows the roadway profile, and then the dotted lines are the topography on either side of it. So the one line is the middle of the road, one line is the edge of the road, 22 feet and 22 feet. But that shows you the existing topography. So this demonstrates that, yes, there would be cutting and filling, but it would still fit within our roadway slopes and curvatures and things like that. So, but this set of drawings that is 3-dimensional rather than just 2-dimensional would probably be, and we'll hear back from James on this because he's just seeing these now. So we're going to get another update from Weston and Sampson about the review of the additional materials that the applicant submitted on Monday. So we're going to hear more from Weston and Sampson on that.
Are these different from the road profiles that we saw? It doesn't.
These are the only road profiles. This is the same road.
Last meeting.
This is the same one.
Yeah.
Yep.
2012.
Yeah.
From
And a
2012.
question that I think needs to be asked in looking at the previous approval was this in a water resource protection overlay district at that time?
Was this in the water protection overlay district then, you're asking, Val?
Yeah, we need to find that out.
It was.
Okay. And what we want to look at, and I'm speaking to, I don't see that James is here, but I'd like us to ask James to.
I'm still here.
Oh, good. I just didn't see you on the screen. I guess what I'd like to do is figure out whether they accounted for the 15% on the lot at that time, or whether it came up. You know, it seems unclear to me that they haven't addressed it.
So question I have too with this is, in order to be buildable lots, you have to be able to access the lot from the roadway.
That's what the site plan does.
Does that show?
This shows site grading and
That
access.
shows
to all
that
the
each
lots.
lot can be graded to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But that's not the proposal, or is it? I'm confused. That's one we just got?
No, this is 2012, but it's the same road as our conventional proof plan.
Okay, but the applicant still has to show that they can access all these lots. Just, that's not their plan.
Right, because they have 27.
So I don't really care what that plan says. I want us, right, they have 27, we have 30, so we want to make sure 30 lots can still access the buildable portion of the lot.
We'll
Not from
review.
their plan not from that old plan, from their plan.
But it's the same road.
It's the same grading.
It's a different plan, it's a different application.
It's the same,
Three less
the
houses.
same exact road.
Is the road actually identical? Is the road actually identical?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the point of this older plan was that we asked the applicant for to flesh out basically the yield plan that they had submitted, to flesh it out further, to prove that the grading would work with the road, with the lots and all that kind of stuff. And they said, oh, well, this just happens to be the same road as what was submitted back in 2012. So we will formally submit the copy of our 2012 plan to serve that purpose.
Okay, on their notice, I just noticed quickly, you look where they added the driveways on their on their proposed plan, and then look at the driveways on the other one, they're completely different in different locations.
So
There are some differences, yes.
Can I take a time out here? I don't mean to be rude or interrupt this conversation, but the conventional plan is only germane to the special permit, and we're going to talk about that next week. We have a lot to do. We have to approve, or make a decision about the OSRD plan in 2 weeks. So I just don't want to get distracted. We can talk about the special permit after that. The hearing isn't even closed yet. Our 90 days on the special permit haven't started. The conventional plan is not germane to our discussion of the review of the OSRD proposal.
So we're doing OSRD first. They're not going together. They're first, and then much later the other.
It's backwards.
Yeah,
I
okay.
totally understand and agree.
I thought you said they were going together.
But I
They
think,
are going together, but we have
Different timelines.
different timelines, and nothing about the conventional subdivision plan is going to right now influence our review of the preliminary plan, because we're just reviewing the preliminary plan as it was submitted, assuming that all the special permit stuff either is or is not dealt with in the background. But we'll caveat the preliminary plan review by saying it all depends on what
As
we
long
come
as
up
that's
with in the special permit. But we can't, we have to, they've submitted a plan. If we don't respond to them by the 21st of June, it's automatically approved, and we haven't had the opportunity to comment on it. So what we need to look at is the OSRD plan and consider comments on that and raise our concerns about it. And again, understanding that because it's still not necessarily the final concept, depending on the special permit giving them the right to the OSRD, which is going to confirm the number of lots that's available. Right now, we're looking at the maximum. If for whatever reason it ends up being 33 lots, then somehow it's going to be reconfigured, but it's still going to be largely the same.
Can you clarify what the expectations for the comments are? Because I feel like every time we have a comment, it's like, well, that will come when we approve the special permit and we move forward in the design process. So what types of comments are we looking to provide other than, yes, we think you could get a maximum of 36 lots?
The comments are going to not be so much about the plan that's there. I mean, obviously, any comments we have about it, we would make about it. The comments are going to be more about what we want to see in the definitive subdivision plan. Like, yes, this looks okay on paper, but prove out the grading, that kind of thing. Like, in 2 dimensions, your OSRD plan works, but like Bill said, we don't know about 3 dimensions for the OSRD plan, so that's a comment that we make, that kind of thing.
Because I think some of us are fixating on the numbers. You're saying we shouldn't focus so much on the numbers then, right? Because that could be a variable. Because to get the 36, you got to prove the 30.
Right.
So I think to Bill's point, I think we all want to make sure that we go that proper step by step and make sure that we don't end up with 36 when in reality it's not really, the baseline's not even real.
Right, but we aren't going to end up with 36. We're going to end up with whatever the special permit says when we get there.
Right, you're not setting the number, no matter what you vote.
Okay.
No matter what number you vote, it's not going to be for sure the number that they're going to get, because you're going to be looking at the actual filing and you'll have answers to these questions at that time.
I might use the example. So why would we need to include comments that say, like, we're gonna want to approve the grading plan? Like, of course we want to approve the grading plan.
It's helpful to set context for your expectations of what's missing in this filing. And by explaining to them the depth of the information that you want, that will help them decide whether it's worth the investment to do the additional work to do an OSRD plan, which what they have is that previous plan that was approved has more work in it than what they've done for the OSRD plan yet. And they're going to have to make a fiscal decision on their end as to what they want to do. And I think that there's a reason why they desire to look at the OSRD plan. And we're going to find out more as we go once they file for it.
So Val, if I may, if I'm understanding you, what we should be looking more at is like the emergency access, water, tying the water lines together, traffic reports. That's more of the idea what we should be, or the board should be expressing that they're looking for.
These are your caveats, and I'm keeping track of all of it and putting together what you'll have in about a week. So you'll have time before the next meeting is a summary of everything that you've said and all the concerns that have been raised by the residents, and good questions have been asked, and the information we have from the developer. And what we'll do is that way you're not having to try to remember everything, and you'll have this written comment that you can then add to or subtract from or edit as a group, and you're saying, here's what we agree with, but here's the concerns we have about what we're seeing. And that helps them understand and helps you set the tone for what the filing has to include, whether it's a definitive plan or an OSRD plan.
So is the existing bridge structure on the Essex Park Road, is that of concern, and is a traffic study for the additional houses of concern at this?
Well, they're doing the traffic study in preparation for the filing, so we know that they're working on that already. And then I think that what we would say is we're going to expect that part of this development is going to include an inspection of that culvert and an understanding of the load-bearing capacity of that culvert, and the expectation that we would condition that you replace the culvert with an appropriate crossing if needed. So they can understand the impacts of what they're planning to do. They may have, what we want to know is, were they assuming that that was something that we would have to do? And the answer would be no, we're expecting you to do it. And are we expecting you to do some better soil analysis before you come in with your definitive plan or your OSRD plan? Yes, we are looking. We think that you have ledge based on what some of the comments we're hearing from the neighbors, that sort of thing. So we want them to address these things. All the things that you're thinking, all of these questions that you're asking are good, and we may not be able to answer them right now. But those are the kinds of things that we're listing as you go. We are keeping track. And so all of that will be summarized for you. So keep asking questions, but we're not going to be able to answer them. But so you'll get to a number, and you'll also have this long list of questions and concerns that you've reasonably come to based on what information you have and what you don't have. And that's all that this process is about.
I have another completely other topic on this. So a member of the public who's spoken several times asked about calculating a value for trees removed and asking for compensation for that. Is that something that we would put in our special permit, or is that something we would address at the time of the application?
That's something that we would need to look at with respect to our rules and regulations around subdivision control, because if it's something that's not in our subdivision control, we can't make up new rules as we go. We have to play by the list of rules that's in there. And and it does address trees. I'd have to go back and look at it in that context, but we can't start asking for things that are beyond the scope of the rules and regulations that the town has accepted.
But you may say to yourselves, do we value the trees that are there? They're pretty significant trees by having more open space, or do we feel that a conventional subdivision is going to be more desirable? And weigh those options. Those are the kinds of things that you're going to be looking at And that's the goal of an open space plan, is to reduce the impact on the environment in terms of the tree cutting and grading and that sort of thing that has to go on in order to create an environment for houses.
So in other words, we would have to have a tree valuation method and compensation in our bylaw to add that as a provision for this.
It would need
for
to be
this project.
in our rules and regulations for subdivision control.
And that would be unusual.
What's that, Bill?
That would be very unusual. It's understood that they're going to have to cut down trees in order to build a road and have the houses created. So it would be unusual to have a regulation like that in your subdivision rules and regulations.
But we do have subdivision regulations around trees, so they are addressed. And we just have to, it says,
Of a certain size,
yeah.
you're trying to protect them. And I think that's definitely going to be something you want to consider when they lay out the road, whichever road it's going to be. You're going to want to walk the center line of it to see where those big trees are and see if they can tweak where the road is to try to preserve the older, most significant trees that are in good health.
We have a section, protection of natural features, all natural features such as trees, wooded areas, watercourses. So it talks about that, and then there's also another section that also talks again about trees of, this is actually new trees to be put in. So it talks about new trees that we put in to replace it. So there are sections in our subdivision control bylaw that talk about this, but we can't go beyond the authority that those give us, I guess.
But we would have a response to questions from the public about why we're not able to do certain things.
Right, yep, yeah, yeah. And that's, that is that's something we have to keep in mind as the planning board, is we have chapter 41, we have chapter 40 of Mass General Laws, we have our zoning bylaw, we have our rules and regulations, and those are what we get to work within. We can't, like the whole parking thing, it's in the bylaw as a setback, and the planning board doesn't have the authority to change dimensions in the bylaw. The planning board does have the authority to vary dimensions that are suggested in the rules and regulations. So the first thing you see in the rules and regulations is the planning board has the right to waive these regulations when it's in the interest of the town. So that's a discussion that we can have on those sort of things.
So that's my question, because I don't know the answer. You said the water resource protection overlay, that the planning board can give issue a special permit to that.
Correct.
Why?
Because it's in the bylaw.
It specifically says in the bylaw, it doesn't say in
Yeah,
this
it does.
bylaw. No, that's what I'm asking. It doesn't say right here it does. It just says special permit. It doesn't say who the special permit granting authority is.
We are.
We are.
We're the special permit granting authority.
For all special permits?
Yep.
That's in the
That's what I
bylaw
want to
too.
make sure, because it has
No,
to be
we
specified,
are.
yes.
We're
No,
defined
that,
as the
it
special.
is, special permit granting authority, the planning board shall act as a special permit granting authority. It's right
I
there.
just want to make sure, that's all.
Yep.
Lisa knew.
Perfect. That's what I want to make sure, so somebody doesn't come up later.
One thing I'd like to mention too is, and again, this comes later, but is the whole, one thing that I'm afraid of are massive retaining walls. Because when we walked the site, there were some pretty beautiful dramatic grade changes, right? And so when you try to visualize the road as it's looping around and you're trying to create at least a way for each of these parcels to meet the road, I think from the planning board's point of view, I would want us to maintain some control over, I would hate to see like 50-foot retaining walls, right, at the edge of these properties. Like, I don't know if you've seen in Hamilton, some of those developments they've done, especially as it faces the open area. I mean, I think it's just a topic that we should maybe earmark for later, but something worth thinking about.
That's a good point. because I'd also like to see that any lots that have to have retaining walls on them in order to create buildable portions of them, that they're part of the special permit, not left for the building permit. So they're done during the subdivision to create the lots that are necessary for that purpose.
So what you're saying is another thing that underscores the perceivable benefit of the open space development is that you're protecting 70% and you're not building anything in that, and you're concentrating your development in a much smaller footprint. Shorter roads, smaller lots. So what I have up on the screen, just to help maybe put this process into context a little, is this is the planning board decision from 2013 for the set of plans that had the loop road and the through road connected to. And this is in the material that's in the folder, but the introductory part just talks about what was submitted and where it is, and then these are the decisions that the planning board made, and there's 9 points, and so it's, the point being is a preliminary review. We're not committing to anything. We have an opportunity to make comment and caveats, that kind of thing, and it's just an opportunity to, in this review, we would say things like, yes, the lot sizes meet the requirement of the bylaw. And then what we also need to look at here, which would be part of this, is the waiver for the road length to go to the 1,500 from the 1,200 feet for Road A. And that's probably the most significant part of the preliminary plan review is granting that waiver and conditioning it by requiring the emergency access road gated in conformance with whatever the fire department would want to see there for the passage of their vehicles.
So Val's going to write up essentially a list like this based on everything that we've collected already, and then we'll review that for our next meeting to do the vote?
I've already done a lot of that. That's what you have in front of you here, this draft.
Okay.
If we just want to kind of zip through this a little, Val and I will be working on this together to build it out, but I do want to kind of walk through this. Just so if you have comments, and you don't have to make comments now, but look at this as a starting document. I mean, it's a little bit more than the decision that I just showed you, but I'm trying to be, surprise, surprise, uber thorough here. So the first page just talks about the scope of it, and then the scheduling, which we've already talked about. So what I had kind of set up, and Val had given me some guidance on how to kind of set this up, and we'll continue to build this out, like I said, is talk about the scope of the preliminary site plan review, preliminary subdivision plan review, and there's nothing there other than just stating what we're looking at. The review criteria just lists the Town of Essex zoning bylaw and the Town of Essex rules and regulations as the criteria that we're using to evaluate it. Submitted materials from the applicants just lists the materials that we have received, and all of this is just to memorialize the material that we're looking at. Then findings is going through, findings would very much mimic what James has put together with Weston and Sampson's review, and mostly highlighting the things where he has comments, the things where he has no comments we don't need to dwell on, because no comment is no comment. So the findings would be that, including, and then in there we would, if we choose to grant the waiver, that is where we would do it. So there are two sets of findings. One is based findings revolving around the Essex zoning bylaw, and then findings around the rules and regulations relative to subdivision control. And then we would make a decision and determinations. And that's how I'm proposing structuring the document. There is some more information to fill in here. And we can walk through this, or we can, Val and I can work to build it out a little bit more, but we will have to walk through it next week. And we already have this hearing continued, and we have 44 Main Street. Matt?
So this is just a comment regarding the open space. And I know that, Weston and Sampson's noted it here, that where this open space is given or granted to what authority. Will is prepared a response, a nonprofit organization, so on and so forth. But, specifically right here under the open space requirements, this open space shall be connected. So I get it, open space is awesome, but I'm not fully convinced there's value to 50 acres if we only have 3 spots. It's not connected to anything. You're on a private road. What happens when you get an overflow of users? Do the neighbors get mad? So on and so forth.
So so Val, I don't know if you can help with this, the definition of connected. My understanding of connected was that the open space on the parcel has to be
One piece.
one piece. Because on the proposal that they've given us, there are in fact, there's some open space up here, and that's not connected, so that doesn't count.
Right, so here it says in our bylaws, strips and patches of land proposed as open space will not be accepted. I'm not arguing whether it is or it isn't accepted. I'm just wondering, what is the value of this 50 acres? And I know it's not necessarily currently where we're chasing this, but it would be nice to see somebody's draft of what this land would be utilized, whether it's trails, whether there is access to where the septic fields are for soccer fields. I'm not sure,
Right.
But we do spell out in our bylaws, what the open space requirements are, and maybe it's simply, is also can be suitable for and protected and maintained for wildlife habitat. I'm not sure, but,
Right.
there's variations here, and it would be, it's interesting to me to know what this size parcel of land would be of value to the town.
I
That
think
is,
related to that, since we have Val here, I have a question. If they were to create a land trust, and then, let's say, with the idea that it's absorbed by, Greenbelt or Manchester Essex Conservation, whoever, what happens in the case, let's say nobody's interested, right? There's no access to it, there's no trails. With the homeowners association, is there any precedent? That seems like that would make the homeowners' fees so incredibly high, it wouldn't make it really feasible from a business perspective. Are there precedents for other forms of trusts, or how does that usually work out?
Well, there can be a conservation restriction put on it by the developer, but normally you have somebody that's going to oversee that. It sounds like there's a vision here for more than one use. If you count those septic fields as, say, for example, as open space. The example that I provided to Lisa, and I think I sent it to everyone, was a subdivision approval, I believe, for an open space development where it wasn't sorted out in the beginning, and there was only so many lots that would be released before that got sorted out. And it would be something that the planning board would have the decision on. So, for example, if the endowment wasn't enough for, say, a particular trust, and another one wasn't interested because it's too far away and doesn't have value to them, and you're down to, okay, maybe the town conservation commission would have interest in it, there'd still need to be, I believe, money set aside when it's gifted to the town for maintenance, at least to get everything started and get the conservation commission able to document what's there and so forth. So they need to have a pretty strong idea of who they're talking to heading into this. It shouldn't be something where they sort that out at the very end, and you wouldn't condition it to allow that to happen. You would condition it that lots aren't going to be released, or only 5 lots would be released before they can have that sorted out, because that's critical. And you're in control by doing that. You'd say, okay, maybe they say, okay, we need to sell 5 lots to have the money to do the endowment, to give the land to this group that we've reached an agreement with, and then you could mutually agree, okay, we will only release 5 lots and no more until you get to the point where you have deeded that over to this other group and they've accepted the land. Like, that's the kind of thing that would take place. Or, well, I don't see how you can do it any other way. The open space requirement, I agree, would be very large requirement for an HOA to try to keep up the land. It could never be used for open space. That's a question that you want to ask. Is it something of benefit? Are the trails valuable? You know, and that's the kind of thing we can evaluate as part of the write-up. Why this could have value or why it might not have value. It's not helpful that we haven't had that conversation heading into the preliminary plan stage, because it would be great to know, well, this group is interested and we're starting talks, and that would show that there's value. But without that context, it's difficult to know how the outcome would be. And so you'd want to point to there'd be a limited number of lots that would be released until that issue is resolved.
Again, this is a sort of a chicken or the egg kind of problem, because until the applicant is in a position where they have reasonable confidence that the OSRD subdivision is a go, they're not going to reach out to conservation organizations, and a conservation organization isn't going to talk to someone who doesn't know what they're going to do yet. So it's a...
Understood.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a catch-22 there. So, Val, have you looked at the document I sent out this afternoon?
Unfortunately, no, but I do have time set aside to work with you on all of this. We had some grant deadlines today.
Okay. So just to sort of, to walk through it briefly so that planning board members, if you have other comments or questions, we did, if you go to the third page, it talks about findings. And here, this is where we will basically list the comments that may have come in that we feel rise to the level of being memorialized in this document. And it includes, you can see in the middle of the page, it says use WSE review and findings to fill this in. So the categories that James has reviewed in the zoning bylaw and in the rules and regulations are laid out there, and this can be built out, but it basically is reflecting his comments about what we want to do. When we get to the subdivision control regulations, Section 5 talks about preliminary plans, and this is on the middle of page 4. And Section 7 talks about general requirements and design standards for all subdivision plans. And a lot of that material is really definitive plan detail. So I think a lot of that would be deferred to the definitive plan. And it doesn't hurt to point it out here. So this document is our opportunity to make note and comment on anything about the review plan. Again, remembering that it doesn't grant either 36 lots and it doesn't grant the right to any of this. It's just a review of that plan in a, I mean, it's in an official way, but it carries no legal weight, if you will. It basically informs the applicant what we're going to be looking for in the definitive subdivision plan and or other processes that may need to precede that.
Add environmental review.
I'm sorry? Val? Sorry.
Can you add the environmental one review on there? I mean, he's already agreed to do it, but.
Yeah, that comment came in from the Conservation Commission today, so we'll add that in under findings.
Okay.
or it just, I'll work on that with Val to see where that goes in, but that's a comment from the Concom about the ES1.
I know tonight somebody asked if there was a list of waivers submitted, but I didn't catch an answer to that. Did they submit a list of waivers that they're looking to?
There's only one waiver that they're asking for right now,
Okay,
and that is the dead-end road length.
okay.
I know this has
Not the
come up
parking?
100 times. I'm sorry, I'm still unclear. I don't understand why that's called a dead-end road, since there's access, either a paved road or a gravel road with an easement to Turtleback. Why does that need a waiver?
It doesn't really, it depends. The problem here is that our subdivision rules and regs do not define dead end. They don't say what it means to be a dead end. Is it dead to everyone? Or, I mean, these roads are a dead end to public driving through, but that's not really the concern of public safety. So it's vague whether it really is a dead end or it's not. It's not a dead end to public safety, but it is a dead end to you and I. And in talking to the applicant, it seemed safer to ask for the waiver so that it's very clear.
Okay.
So the waiver is really, we don't think we need this, but we're going to ask for it anyway, kind of thing. Because there is throughway for public safety, which is the main concern in a dead end. Most towns, when they talk about dead ends, that is the reason for addressing dead ends and for limiting dead ends is for public safety access and not trapping too many people behind a fallen tree or something like that.
And I'm not for or against this, but I would say that some town members could feel that a through road would be more beneficial to the entire town, considering Apple Street is cut off with only one way in, one way, or, a throughway.
The Turtleback, you're saying?
Yeah, the throughway, not just being an emergency access drive, but as an actual throughway. For the same reasons we're saying that you'd want that emergency access for Turtleback is the same reasons I'd say you could potentially argue that having a throughway, permanent throughway for all town members would be beneficial.
You're saying no gate?
No gate. I'm not saying I'm for this, against this, I'm just making note that that is, and potentially considering that there are two bridge structures on either side of Apple Street that at some point will need repairs or...
Apple Street has a culvert at one end and a bridge at the other end, and Essex Park Road has a bridge on it. So it's all...
You got three bridges, and you might need at some point another access.
Right.
Just saying.
Hopefully not all at the same time.
Hopefully not all at the same time.
Well, you would have access if you did them one at a time.
Right. Just a note.
Is there anything else we need to discuss this evening?
What's that?
Is there anything else we need to discuss this evening?
No, unless you have more questions or thoughts about any of the conditions that we want to put down, knowing that you're going to get another draft from Val and I, probably first thing next week, for a decision that would be something we're going to vote on the 18th. And we won't be able to deliberate on it until the 18th.
Motion to adjourn.
Not yet. Okay, so you have a lot of reading to do. Anyone on the board is free to reach out to me and or Val or Bill, whoever you want to. Just don't do it as a deliberating group. Any of you can email Val with a question. Any of you can email me or Bill with a question. You can email all three of us with the same question, however you want to do it. You're welcome to do that. We can't talk about this as a group until we reconvene in 2 weeks to make, hopefully, a decision, because we have a deadline of the 21st, which is, if we vote on this on the 18th, then we'd be able to finalize the document for delivering on Friday the 20th. Anything else? What?
Bad timing to be away. No, it's good.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that covers everything in our agenda. The only other thing is if there is public comment before we adjourn. Any public comment before we adjourn?
Or online.
Online? Yeah. Anything online?
Nobody's written anything.
Okay. Simone?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.